Good afternoon from Vietnam, Michael. Thanks a lot for spending your morning to join our Inside Sharing show and share your stories with our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners, I want to say thank you to you.
And thank you, Ha. It's an absolute pleasure to be here on your show.
Uh, Michael, I've been inviting you to the show because I admire the works that you do, and I share. I'm curious to know why you have a big interest on China. You work all over the world, and then you have been people with executive coaching. So that's why and then you author a new book also, get promoted. So congratulations. Today we're gonna examine your journey together. All right.
Sure. I'm really excited about that. And thank you again. I also admire what you have done. I know you're closing in or will have surpassed 500 episodes
You get it
by the
today.
time this airs. So that's a pretty amazing feat. Congrats.
Thank you very much. And you've been to my country before, so it's an honor for our people if we can have you to do a little introduction about who you are and the work that you do. Would you please do that for us?
Sure. So who am I? My name is Michael Wenderoth. I am a proud and dedicated husband, father of two teenagers, and what I would say is a global citizen. I have lived all around the world. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm originally from the US, um, but I'm also half Chinese, so I have very global, multiracial roots. And I care deeply about bringing what I would say, I care deeply about bringing greatness to life.
Hmm.
I've had multiple careers, and that is the thread that has run through all of them, whether that's bringing products, services, helping people achieve their best. But really, the thread that runs through who I am and what I do is bringing greatness to life.
Hmm.
And in very practical terms, in terms of what I do, I am an executive coach who works with leaders around the globe. And the easiest way to think about this is that I help good people get ahead and make a greater impact
Hmm.
without um, them having to feel like they're selling their souls in the
Hmm.
process of doing that. And I say that because there's many hard truths in the workplace about the world that a lot of people feel like they cannot accept or they ignore. And so when they do that, they struggle or they miss things.
Hmm.
And so as a coach, I help support them, illuminate them, challenge them,
Hmm.
and to help them get ahead and make a greater impact when they feel like frustrated that they're hitting glass ceilings where they're not advancing.
Hmm.
And again, I do this as a coach, primarily one-on-one with executives around the globe,
Hmm.
but I also speak, do workshops, and I also write a lot.
Hmm.
And so you alluded to my book, which I'm very proud of, Get Promoted, What You're Really Missing at Work That's Holding You Back. And we may dive and talk about what people really are missing and holds them back. But that's more in depth about the book. So that in a nutshell is who I am and what I do.
And Michael, you have a phenomenal career that really admiring, and then you introduced in less than 2 minutes. So I need to dive in deeper to make sure that our audience will have a deeper understanding of what makes you to do what you're doing now, right? So let's travel time together. And when I was young, I wanted to become an astronaut and wearing the suit and jump in different planets, right? I think it's cool, but life did not give me any chance to do near to what I wanted to become, right? And so for you, uh, you've been travel the world, you've been doing executive roles, you have been executives now to get better at what they do without have to sell in their soul, like you say, right? So tell me, when you were young, Michael, what was your dream about the future, though?
Well, so first I would say that we're both still very young. And so we should always still have dreams. I
Yep.
dream, and I've continued to always dream
Mm.
throughout my life about a possibility. about things that don't exist that are yet to come that we can bring to life. And, to be honest, since you want to go way back and talk about dreams, I would say, you talked about being an astronaut. I know people who dreamed about being a doctor or doing X or Y. And honestly, when I was little, I didn't have a set dream. I think dreams also evolve and you they merge from you going and doing things, trying things, being exposed to things. And so I never had that one set dream, although I did have lots of people and things that inspired me. And so I would almost shift it from having a dream about being something to being inspired by different people. And so I grew up in the States, as I mentioned. And I think this goes to the idea of role models, of people who inspire us or are doing things out there, what you're trying to do with your show. Just gives you a little insight into who I am. I was very inspired by Michael Chang, the tennis player, growing up, right? First and youngest male, and still is, to have won the French Open let's go back in time to 1989. And I grew up outside of Philadelphia, which is this great sports town. Okay, I know this is very American, but it's this great sports town where we've always had really great teams that never kind of won. that always got close, but they never won. But there was a lot of breakthroughs, right? Going back to 1980 when the baseball team, the Phillies, won the World Series. All the way through now, I still follow things, even though I haven't lived in Philadelphia for more than 30 years. You go back to 2018 when the Philadelphia Eagles, the football team, wins and beats Tom Brady, and so there is this theme of things that younger, when I kind of looked at some of these heroes and people who inspired me, that they pushed through, they achieved amazing things, and a lot of that was around belief. And a lot of that inspired lots of people, right? In the tennis world, Chinese Americans, underdogs. And so that was always this theme that inspired me, kind of growing up, to see kind of things that were possible, of people who could do things when they were told they could not.
So the story from other people inspire you for you to grow up and do, and try to aim at, the best version of what you are. And then I agree with you that even now, every day, we still can, have new dreams to set the bar higher, right? But look at the when you first started to realize take serious about the future, what was your weirdest things about Michael's gonna become? What was your what did you think about the best possible of you before?
Well, I think I always just had a curiosity about things. I like learning about things, how things work, how things happen, whether those are good or bad. And so again, I didn't have this set notion, right? If you had told me back in high school, let alone my 20s or in business school when I was in Silicon Valley at Stanford, that today I would be based out of Europe serving global clients as a coach, I would have never envisioned that possibility. In fact, I've had about 5 careers. Pretty much every one of those jobs or professions didn't exist when I was a child. So, this is where, again, dreaming of possibilities, of seeing things that aren't possible. But I think that the thread, and to answer your question, it was these ideas around curiosity, this idea of doing things, that led me to go after, I wouldn't say totally passions, but areas that interested me deeply, or I saw opportunity. So why I first went to China to live and work, very early in the 90s. Why I decided to leave all that when China was really booming and start over, so to speak, in Silicon Valley, which was just emerging at the time. and then why I left an emerging Silicon Valley to shift things up and move over here to Europe. So there was always, I've done a lot of reinventing. We can talk about that. I think there's some themes there when you do it enough that you figure out how to do that kind of more quickly and shift. And I think that's a skill that we all need kind of in the changing world.
Yep. And that one
and I'm very fond. I'll just say one last thing here, which is, I'm very fond of this saying by the anthropologist Margaret Mead, and she said that never doubt that a small group of dedicated people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that, that comment, I've also seen it. I've lived it. I've done lots of things and been really privileged to be parts of, whether that's organizations, teams, or now what I'm doing, kind of co-creating and working with executives about making a difference. And I think you really have to be dedicated and work with others to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, let's examine why you left America early, and back in the 90s, and go to China when the economy is really booming over there, and then you decided to go to another country. Why? Or the comfort zone that you are already in, you decided to leave and go to explore the new thing, though?
So I think this is a comment on actually interesting, right? In college, I studied history, okay, which is not exactly the most typical degree, or it's one that you kind of wonder what you're going to do afterwards. Most people think, well, people who study history go teach. And I studied immigration history, and we know from immigration history, there's always this push and a pull that occurs. So the push, for me, honestly, the 1990s, the early 90s was a bad economy. So it was not a great time to be graduating, let alone with a history degree. And so a push there was to find work, right? A real practical thing that leads a lot of us. And the pull was, and I will say in the 90s, it was not like China today. A lot of people, need to kind of look back like a historian through time. China was emerging. You go back to the 70s, right? So this was a heavily planned economy coming out of Mao's dictatorship. 80s were just emerging, things were happening, but still very much a state-run planned economy. Barely coming onto the world stage. So it wasn't kind of an intuitive place like, going to China now, which is absolutely booming, COVID aside. And so there was a pull there. And honestly, there was the pull of, I'm part Chinese. So there was an appeal there. Although we can talk about it. My grandparents left China and kind of asked why I was going back. They had come to the States, which they felt was tremendous opportunity. We left China in the 1940s. Why would you possibly want to go back to that? But I think there was just an interest, again, this passion and curiosity to really improve my Mandarin, which was terrible at the time, having grown up, identity being mixed and growing in a place with not many Chinese. I did not want to speak Chinese or even be Chinese. So there was part of that. And it was a very interesting, dynamic, almost even messy place where things were shifting. And so that was very interesting to me. And Beijing at the time, I would say, still one of my favorite cities. You were more likely, first of all, not to meet many expatriates or Westerners. And those that you did were very interesting. They were journalists, they were students, they were diplomats. So not as much business people or people going to get rich. And so people very much interested in the culture and learning about China. So that's what took me there. There was this hard economic reality, like find some interesting work or job, and a pull. And I would say too, as I kind of talk or look back on my career, when you invited me, there was this also interest of, going somewhere where you could stand out. You would be early, that was growing. And I mean, I've never regretted the decisions of anything I've done, but China certainly just started to take off at that time, and that provided lots of very interesting opportunities by being there.
So what did you answer to your grandparents when they asked you why did you come back to the place that they left long ago, though?
Well, yeah. So this is interesting. I kind of smiled and I said, you're right about a lot of things. And then I just went and did what I needed to do. Very practical thing, right? They did the same thing. Very pragmatic of where they went. I think pragmatism very much runs in my Chinese side. But it was also what my mother did, right? The typical Asian upbringing is you're going to go study and be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer, one of these kind of prestigious positions. She wanted to be an artist. And of course, that is not particularly looked upon well as a career path. So she listened to my grandparents, but she also didn't listen to them. So she went off to college and then did kind of things that she wanted. And I think there's a little bit of kind of rule breaking and, bucking the trend, following things, but they've always still been very happy and loved us.
Wow.
But I think about that fondly. Their reaction. Right.
Michael, a lot of, in our culture, is a lot of us holding back our dreams because when we need to follow or listen to the advices or things being said by the people close to us, right? So in your case, you've been out and then you've been able to prove successful. So tell us the secret for you to be able to go against the advices from the family and I still follow the thing from your heart to do what you love to do. How did you do that?
That's a great question. And I think there's kind of a mixed approach, right? I mean, I will say that I think there's this Western philosophy, follow your passions, right, and everything will happen. I actually don't totally agree with that. I do believe kind of this idea that I said before that you go in and you experiment and you have to kind of experience things. And so, yeah, I mean, my mother, right, kind of forced us to do a lot of things growing up. Like you were going to go learn an instrument, sport, you had to do all these things. And yeah, there was some resistance there. But I think also kind of going in and trying or applying yourself, you learn from it. And sometimes you kind of learn a passion. This idea, kind of I said before, around, dreams kind of also emerge from trying things and doing things. And so I would say there's a little bit of kind of give and take there. I wasn't totally rejecting and following my own path. At the same time, I think you do have to kind of pay attention to the things that resonate with you. We all have our strengths and our interests, but I think they evolve over time, so you need to revisit that. And you need to pay attention to things that really kind of make you miserable, and probably stop doing them. And I think that's a tough balance. I think it exists. This tension can exist much more, in an Asian upbringing, right, where you have stronger, I won't say every Asian family, expectations of what you will do or what success looks like. And I would say everyone has to define what success is. Yeah. When I work with clients, I ask them, what does success look like to you? It's not my definition, doesn't necessarily need to be society's definition. But I think that's an ongoing conversation you need to have with yourself, as to what are the things, right, that make you fulfilled and bring you satisfaction. I don't believe happiness is necessarily the goal. I don't believe that we should only do things that make us happy or passionate. I think you learn a lot from going outside of your comfort zone, doing things you don't particularly like, taking some risks. But you want to kind of regulate that. Yeah. And I think that kind of mix, bringing those two things together, help you kind of iterate and find your niche. And I think there's also a certain practicality to that. This is the last comment I will make on that. I mean, if you're not economically well off and you need to manage that, or you want to pay for the education like my grandparents did of us, you do need money, right? You need some marketable skills, and just kind of blindly thinking I'm going to follow my passions and that's going to emerge isn't necessarily that pragmatic. And so I think you've got to kind of find that balance between the kind of pragmatism, but also doing some experiments and finding things that motivate you and make you fulfilled.
And then during that experiment running, Michael, you've been up in your career, and then you just start doing your own, follow entrepreneurship yourself, right? And it reminds me in your journey that you study in the country very stable, you move to the next one, and when things got stable, you move to the next one. So it's keep on experimenting the new thing. So go back to the movement that you decided to leave the corporate world behind and then starting your own, your own journey as a, like entrepreneur yourself. Why did you do that, Michael? It's very risky running business alone.
Yeah, I think there's also, again, this push-pull, and you hit on a great word there around risk. Okay, and when I look or I have conversations with people, at my particular career, I'll talk about that. People see, wow, shifted countries, changed industries, did this over time, like this continual reinvention, 5 careers, very risk-seeking. And on the contrary, and this goes to that kind of maybe pragmatic Chinese side, I'm very risk-averse. I do not, embrace risk. I think you need to have a plan B. You need to be prepared if things go wrong. And so while it may look, particularly on kind of quick look or a short description that I took this leap of leaving China and I went to Silicon Valley, there was kind of a thought process to that. Or when I left corporate and then I started a coaching business. So there's a part in there, it often gets scrubbed from the story. But in a nutshell, I would say there's two elements. One is this idea of kind of experimenting while you're still in the stable position. So in the example where before I left corporate and went on my own, I was already saying, hey, I want to be a teacher of some form, right? That could be a trainer, a coach, a professor. And while I was still in my corporate role, I took opportunities, right? I led the training for our teams. I helped out, even though I was a managing director role, facilitating things across the company, doing guest lectures outside, on short topics to see, one, did I like those things? Talking to people, as to, hey, you're going to move over. What does that look like in terms of compensation, in terms of things like that? So you think about those things. And then kind of when I did move over too, there was still a process of experimenting, right? There was a phase where I was literally doing consulting, sales training, teaching, coaching at the same time. Four different areas. And if you could think about that as 4 experiments as to, hey, which ones resonate with me? I think you don't know things until you do them. And you need to actively do them. What might fit well into my life? It was also a shift there where it wasn't just about me. I had my family, I had my kids to also think about. And also, frankly, where would it make a lot of impact? And so that's how, those first year or 2, I did some experiments, I networked, and that's what then evolved there. So it wasn't necessarily as much risk as it would seem. I think you can de-risk things, and I would encourage people to be thinking about that. I see lots of executives who will just make the leap, right? They have the expression, the grass is always greener somewhere else. They make the leap with, and the phone stops ringing, and then there's this identity crisis, and they realize, oh my gosh, like my situation before was really good. Where they could have done experiments inside, they could have tried some things outside that would de-risk the path or prepare that it might be wrong.
Yep.
Right?
Wow.
And so that's also kind of if I look back early, China to the US, US over to Europe, leaving my corporate job, and I had a period as a consultant on my own as well. There's a lot of de-risking that was going on.
Wow.
But I think also I tend to see that executives I work with will sometimes stay in one place too long, right? And they get frustrated about things, or they get bored. And so I think some of that also kind of keeps the engine going. And because of the pace of change now, we always need to be ready to reinvent ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think if I take this all the way back, in China, I saw the writing on the wall, right? Smart, hardworking American guy set up hospitals in China, very breakthrough idea, excellent Mandarin. But I realized, right, in that 5 years, right, that first 5 years I was in China, 6 years, things were just taking off. And my competitive advantage, right, to say against all these very ambitious Chinese, I needed to further differentiate myself. Because all of a sudden, right, you're going to get these amazing Chinese who at that time would work for less, who would work insane hours, which I did too, but you got more competition. And so sometimes you need to go somewhere where there's less competition. And so that was another piece that kind of said, I need to prepare for this. Okay, well, I'm going to go get an MBA. I'm going to go be on the ground floor in Silicon Valley to see what's up and to try some new things.
Beautiful.
So that's a little bit of this, where I went.
Well, Michael, during that reinventing the wheel, reinventing yourself, right? And then you said de-risking. During the de-risking process, you do a lot of works at the same time. A trainer, a sales trainer, a consultant, a coach, and what else? There was 4 of them. I forgot to have a 4th one.
Teaching also. Teaching
yes.
as a professor.
So each of those small what you do will have a little contribution, a little impact on your life, and those all together accumulate to the standard of living you're having back then, right? So a lot of us, because we're doing so much at once, and then we keep on the de-risking process for so long. So what happened to you that you decided, hey, the executive coaching seems to be the perfect one, and I'm going to eliminate the rest of that, or I'm going to reduce the rest of that and focus only on the executive coaching. So can you share that, how you feel back then, so that we can learn from your experience?
Yeah, the main part here is this idea of kind of you need to strategically quit on certain things, right? If you think about, a plant, right, that is growing, and a tree, right, that will have various branches. Typically, if you want that tree to kind of, start to grow or have one trunk or start to produce fruit, you need to kind of prune off certain things, certain branches. Because if there's like 8 branches going out, all the energy is dissipated. Okay? That may be good at the beginning, right? Because you want to see which one is going to become the best branch. But you need to make a decision where to start to focus your energy. Because if it's really dissipated, you're doing 10 things at once. I don't know anyone who could do 10 things at once, right? Well. And so you kind of go through this process of saying, when do I need to let go of something? And that can be very hard because you might have identity, you might have some income related to it. But you have to ask yourself, right, if you want to grow one area, what might you have to let go of somewhere else? And there, I think it's very helpful to have, someone to bounce these ideas off of. In my case, my wife, right, who's, the most important person, key stakeholder, and a lot of things impact her. For some people, it's someone kind of, outside as a coach or a peer. But I think if you have a couple people around you, not who are just going to say, oh, don't worry, it'll all work out. There's certainly some support that you need. But I think also to be challenged, right? Well, if you continue to do this, what does next year look like? You're doing 4 things at once. I was hustling. I was working hard. A lot of hours a week that took a toll, right? well, I can't spend as much time with family or my kids, right? That was not very positive. But you get pragmatic. We got to do what we got to do, and then start to let go. And a lot of people can't say no. They have a very hard time saying no because they feel like they're committed. They feel like doing things is helpful. It's wrapped up in their identity. But sometimes you got to just cut it. And I would say people get into very binary thinking, which is, hey, if I cut this, it's yes or no. Whereas if we, think kind of more abundantly, there's probably like 5 options out there. And in fact, that's the number one thing you can do if you think you only got 2 options. Think of 3 more. Okay? So, I could stop doing this, but, instead of running the course, find my replacement and be a guest, come in once during the semester this week. Okay? Or we think that we go through a door and you can't come back. I have seen lots of ways that you can go through, you shut the door. I did this in previous job. I've seen lots of people kind of rebound and go back to their companies actually for better compensation and in new roles. So I would say we need to think kind of more possibilities, so we don't get in that binary thinking. And then to realize, generally you can always come back, not always. And so that idea of kind of prepare to be wrong, well, what might you do? I could probably still come back and teach in some capacity or those things. So that's what I would offer on that topic.
Wonderful. Now go to the book. All right. Since when you have an idea of writing your own book, Michael?
Say that again?
Since when you started to have the idea of writing your own book?
So I've always liked to write. In fact, we didn't even talk about it. Coming right out of college, I was prepared to go into journalism, and in fact, that's kind of the first arena I went into. And so I've always liked writing. I've always liked publishing. I've written many articles over the years on different topics related to China, related to innovation. Now a lot related to the coaching area that I work in around power and politics. So I've always loved writing, kind of short form. And I thought, yeah, there's probably a book in me at some point. It will emerge. But the book wasn't so much about writing a book per se. It was this realization that I was helping a lot of people coaching. Okay. And I was primarily at that time doing a lot of one-on-one coaching. So many hours in a day, how many clients can you serve? And I had to turn away a lot of clients, and I still do, either because they weren't a good fit or I simply didn't have the capacity. And I also, I donate my time. I will go speak to younger people, university students about the topics that I coach around. And the younger people aren't going to necessarily, hire an executive coach, right? Because of the cost or so forth. But they're the ones who in some ways need parts of that message the most. So the book then became the vehicle by which many of the things I worked on around influence, power, navigating politics, hard truths about how organizations work. I felt putting that out there for people, in a format where they could, do some of their own exercises, talk about how I coach people for things they struggle with, right? Organizations are not fair. The best people don't always be the ones who get promoted.
Exactly.
And so, what is it that helps you rise or get to that next level, right? It's not necessarily the things that some people, particularly early on in their careers, think that it is. And so I see a lot of people struggle with this, going back to the part, like good people, I'm working hard and smart, but I'm frustrated. I'm hitting a glass ceiling. I'm seeing the other person who's not nearly as smart or talented than me got promoted over me. Okay, so that really angers a lot of people. And so I talk about kind of that process by which I help coach people to navigate that. And so putting the book out there is a way of saying, first of all, it clarifies my own thinking and has helped me a lot in terms of kind of a framework by which I work with people. And then it also is out there. So people can look at my book, benefit a lot from the exercises, benefit a lot from the research, which I summarize, right? We know things, for example, around networking, but people don't do it. But networking is the number one way you really kind of propel your career, find new jobs. And so I unpack, decades of research around particular topics around what accelerates careers. And I wanted to put that in a book. So clarifying my own thinking and helping people. And so that's why I wrote the book. And I would say the underlying story here, right? If you pick up the book and you read the introduction, is that, I think it's like when we get upset about things. When I saw kind of mid-career, you've probably seen it, a lot of your listeners probably seen it, either happening to themselves or they watch it happen in their organization. Hey, like these amazing people are being sidelined. Right? They're not rising. They're not making an impact. They're not being promoted to positions of power and influence. Whereas some of the people we dislike, who run organizations in the ground, talk a lot, have a certain aura to them, they are rising disproportionately. And so, that just felt really unjust. But instead of kind of getting angry about that, I really kind of looked into it. Why is this happening? Because it happens all over the place, all over the world, all across organizations. If it's not happening in your organization, you're probably somewhere off the bell chart in terms of difference. So, I was upset about that. And I was like, well, how can I help good people get ahead? Right? Because they just say, I do not want to be like that person, right? Who's the one who's getting ahead because they're pals with the boss, because they take credit for other people's work, because they sound confident even though they have no idea what they're talking about. But I think, again, rather than dismiss those things, of course, that's reality of what tends to get promoted in a lot of organizations, is to flip that around and say, what does the social science say about this? Why do we tend to listen to people who sound confident? Why do we tend to listen to people we have good relationships with or who challenge us around certain things? And so if you can reframe that and look at it, you can embrace some of those skills or behaviors and not change who you are, nor necessarily become some of those people you dislike. And so that's also at base why I do what I do, but also why I wrote the book.
So for many people out there, they want to get promoted at work, right? What is the secret that they need to do, in the priority order, Michael?
So first of all, and this is why the book is called Get Promoted, because this is the number one reason why many clients come to me, right? They're like frustrated because I'm not getting promoted, all right? And the first thing, we can talk about how people do get promoted and so forth, is to ask yourself, why is that important to you? If you get promoted, what does that do for you? What is it right now about your situation you're unhappy with? Okay, and this is the first thing I do when I'm talking to people, when we start to work together, because we know this, right? The evidence is very clear. Like the fact that you're not getting promoted or you want to get promoted, there's a certain amount of ego in there. There's also a certain amount of, I don't feel I'm being valued, by my organization, right? Or this is my measure that I'm getting ahead or I'm doing better. And so there's deeper things that are going on there, right? That, I'm being overlooked. My talents are not being realized. People don't appreciate what I bring. So I think you have to first dig deeper into that, rather than just kind of go blindly and say, getting promoted is the solution to everything. Because often we achieve, and then, you're super happy, you got the bonus, you got the new title, and sure, those things feel good, but they tend to dissipate very quickly, right? And then it's like, what's the next thing? So I think it's very important to first look at kind of what are the underlying motivations there around getting promoted. And for some people, actually kind of moving into that is not the best thing or the best solution for them. They might actually be worse off in different dimensions. But very practically, to go to your point, and my book goes into this in much more depth, but to really simplify it, particularly as you move from the mid to the senior levels in organizations, the evidence here is very clear that it is a lot around how you work with other people. Yeah. Okay, your ability to influence, how people perceive you, how people perceive what you are capable of versus necessarily what you are doing now. And as we know, this isn't kind of your immediate contribution. It's your ability to work with others. So influencing and political skills are in fact the driver, right? More than how smart you are, how hard you work. So really paying attention to that element is critical. And therein, right, and I outlined kind of 5 kind of key drivers is, those political skills, your network, your ability to know people kind of in power and have good relationships with them. Because, you don't promote yourself, someone else does. Okay? Absolutely. So this is a piece that, like, you have to realize. And then you have to realize that there's a lot of inherent bias in that. Okay? What do they think about you? What do they think you're capable of? What do they believe that you've done? They don't see everything you're doing. Yeah. Okay, and this is where you get all sorts of gamesmanship come in. But that ability of network or sponsors in organizations, connected to that, this third part is just visibility and branding, right? If you've got your head chained down to your desk, I see a lot of technical people do this. People really don't know you or know what you're doing. Yeah. And so it's incumbent upon you to help shape that narrative in a way. Another element here is around presence and communication. How you express your ideas. Can you do that? Can you speak to what other people care about? It's not just what you care about. Typical, like a technical person speaking to a commercial person. Commercial person doesn't care necessarily about how the thing is designed. They want to know the benefit because their incentives are around how do they sell this or bring it to a customer. So they need to be able to explain that, right? And so you need to be able to look across an organization and how you kind of show up and present things. And those are, there's more that I talk about in the book, but these are elements that people overlook because they feel like they're soft. And they feel like, this is a shift, right? Typically in high school and university, a little more of a meritocracy. You get a grade and then, that maybe determines where you go or what jobs companies will hire you. So it kind of shifts from this idea of a meritocracy, which we are told a lot in the stories in every culture, right? Work hard, keep your head down, and all things good will happen. Well, you hit this hard reality that in organizations, people make a lot of decisions, people are biased, a lot of irrationality. But here's the point, and why I think why we need to look at good social science research is that people, the way we make decisions, we're very irrational, but we're very irrational in very predictable ways.
Predictable way.
In very predictable ways, right? We know that if you like me, right, or I'm feeling good about myself, I will tend to favor you, right? So there's kind of bias built into that. Or if you've come recommended from someone, you've already got some credibility in my mind.
Got it. Wow.
Yeah, and so I think there's pieces there where we should pay attention to that. And this is where I feel like the leadership industry is really off, because leadership industry is they're selling stuff too, right? And people wanna, why are Hollywood movies that are these fairy tales so popular, right? People want to believe in that stuff. But I think it does a disservice when the leadership industry says, go do these things. Right now it's all about authenticity, being positive, transparent, all good things. But sometimes getting hammered with that message in sound bites on social media, a lot of younger people are moving up their careers, take it, misapply it. right, in their organizations.
Mm.
And it actually hurts their careers. So, School of Positive Psychology is not saying go be positive all the time.
Yeah.
It's saying, draw from strengths, be optimistic and so forth. But you need to kind of understand these things in a nuanced ways and how organizations operate. And, I hear this all the time from clients.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm doing all these things that I was trained, right? But yet this guy gets promoted and not me.
It happened to a lot of us
therein
too.
lies the unjust world. And so part of it is people do need to kind of get the full toolkit.
Yeah.
And there may be embracing things. I mean, I say things that people may feel are uncomfortable, but I would say there's strong evidence behind it, and give it a deeper look.
Yeah.
Your political skills, your network, your branding, and your communication are the key drivers that get you promoted, that move you up.
Yep.
Period.
And then thanks for writing the book, so that it helps people to really look back at what they do versus what they want to get, where they want to get, and whether or not the things that they do now, the things that they are thinking at the moment, is it going to help to get them what the promotion that they want or not. So it's really thanks for writing that one, Michael. If you pick one thing in the book and one chapter in the book that you like most, and I know the question is not fair for you, but just pick one. What would that chapter is?
Well, I mean, the introduction was very important to me because it lays out, the important story when I saw people getting derailed were smart people. So that one has kind of like the emotional core of why I do what I do. I'm very passionate about what I do. And the kind of core underpinning, right? There's evidence, there's lots of patterns I see, and it's parts that, got to work with people through. So that chapter is kind of the emotional one that really drove me to write the book. But I would say the part that I most like, which is the part that my publisher probably least liked and not every reader will love, is I'm a little bit of a geek. And so when someone tells me something, I say, show me the evidence. And so I felt it was very important to write the chapter on the evidence, which was to summarize lots of research around why political skills propel you, why your network matters so much, and what you can do, visibility, brand, and communication. And the research is very extensive as to how these things propel you and can help you. And I think we need to understand that. Not many people want to go read an academic paper, though, or have the patience to do that. And so distilling it down, I feel, in a responsible way, because every piece of research is done at a snapshot in time, has its own inherent bias, not biases, but limitations. And so I enjoy kind of condensing that down. That it's a more dense chapter, even though it's simplified, but there's takeaways in summarizing it. So that chapter to me was very important. And I mean, my book is written in this format called The Rock, The Map, and The Snowball. The Rock is about getting real. What's the hard truth? The map is about getting strategic, understanding the lay of the land. And then the snowball, to bring us full circle here, is about getting doing. You need to do things. You need to do things. Rock, map, snowball. And that's the format in which I wrote the book. And the snowball is the important part, right? You're doing things. But I think this rock, for a lot of people, of like, what's the evidence? Like,
the foundation.
Really? They can kind of see it, but a lot of very good social science research shows these things. So I enjoyed breaking that down. That for me is probably the most interesting part. It's a great question.
Hey, Michael, I have 3 last questions for our conversation today. And I'll try to make it quick because we're running out of time now. So the first question is about thinking. My wife and I, we've been in the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, just simply by asking experts like you, how have you been thinking? So over the years, how have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think, Michael?
Great question, which is twofold. One is to read things outside of your discipline. We get into very siloed thinking, okay? And innovation occurs from looking outside. across. So looking outside my discipline and to read things that you disagree with.
Wow.
To challenge your own thinking. And that's what ultimately I was also doing with the book. I wanted to challenge people who dismiss a lot of the things that I talk about as being despicable, as being underhanded, as being not fair, but to reframe it. And so I think you need to read things that are contrary to what you believe, right? We live in echo chambers. And so it's very easy to read the stuff that reinforces you. And the internet actually works that way. It will keep serving more of that up, which will deepen your beliefs. So think wide and challenge your thinking.
Wow, wonderful. So read the book outside of your discipline, then read the books that you disagree with, so that, it's your
or talk to people, right? It's not, you don't have to read a book necessarily, right? You could talk to someone.
Yep.
And in fact, that's the problem, right? People aren't talking to each other or listening. And just because you're listening doesn't mean you need to agree.
Yeah.
We get very tied up in our own beliefs. And so you need to continually challenge those things.
Got it. The next question is, you are number 2 person that we're going to ask these questions out of everybody we talk to, because we're going to introduce a new series of small little talk, and it's just about the future. And we all have, you write the book, you do a lot of things because you want to build a future. You're going to help the people to improve in their lives, right? So if everything boiled down to one thing that Michael wants to see change in this world, what would that be, Michael?
Wow. One thing I would like to see change in this world. Well, I really would like to see more justice and equity. It is an unfair world. And again, that's partly why I wrote the book, to help people who were getting screwed. But I would really say here that I care deeply about that, and my hope, right, is that technology, the way things are being disruptive, will move us in a positive direction towards justice and equity, and not towards many of the uses that they're being put towards right now.
Yep. And as long as there's a lot more people like you out there, then justice and equity will be prevail again. So I believe so too, Michael. And the last question is about the future. So we knew your past, we knew the work that you do now. Is there anything that you are working on that's exciting and Michael wants to share with our audience so we can celebrate with you in advance?
I've just written my book, so I am going to continue to talk about that. I'm also, like you, having wonderful conversations through my podcast. And so those are 2 things. I haven't reached the level of kind of strategically quitting on those, to use our expression earlier. But what I'm most interested in is, through my work here, helping individuals understand the bias in organizations, understanding how to navigate kind of the unfairness that exists. I think if you know that very well, if you understand how the system works, you're in a much better position to change it. So to go back to this point around justice and equity, I think if we really understand where bias lies, where things are unfair, or how you can game the system in some ways, then you're actually in a much better position to understand how to fix that system. People are only getting promoted because they do X, they talk really loud in meetings. There's ways we can mitigate that. We can design our organizations. We can design the way meetings are held. And I know there's a lot of work around that, but I get a lot of calls now from HR departments or leaders who say, you really understand how the system works. Can you come in here and help us address how to fix it?
Beautiful.
And address some of those things? So that's, one thing at a time. But that's an area that I'm very passionate about, of, how would we go in and make this a better, just, and equitable world?
Beautiful, beautiful. And Michael, I wish you all the best, all the support that you need. all the love that that will go with you in that journey is to make it happen and make sure that the journey is it's not going to be a lonely journey, so you're going to have a lot of people going that with you, all right? And thank you for being so generous to spend your time to join and share your stories with me and the audience. There's a lot of things that I'm noting in here that really meaningful for me to share with my viewers and also with my family, because I want them to come into this world ready, be ready for getting the things that they want, and with the right kind of mindset, with the right kind of with toolkit that they can do it their ways. So thanks a lot. Okay.
And thank you, Ha. And I know you said your wife Vivian is traveling, so
Yeah.
she couldn't be here today, but this was a fantastic conversation and a pleasure, and I hope we do it again in the future.
Yes, and I hope to meet you and your wife and your two teenager children one day, so that we can have coffee together. We can talk about work and life. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have a happy holiday season, Michael. Send our loves to your family, please.
And you as well.
Thank you. Bye bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.